Is AI making you dumber? Not as far as anyone has measured. That is the honest answer. And I want to spend the next 20 minutes on what that question is actually made of, because it is not made of studies. It is made of a moment you have had. It is 11 at night. You know roughly what you think. You can feel the shape of the work you would have to do to find out exactly what you think. And there is a small flinch away from that. And underneath the flinch, a small relief. And your hand is already moving toward the prompt box. It happens faster than any decision. By the time it would be a choice, it is already over. Multiply that by 40 times a day for 2 years, and you get the question the whole internet is arguing about right now. So let me be exact. Nobody has demonstrated that your attention is eroding, or your reasoning, or your working memory. What has been measured so far has not shown the deep machinery degrading. That is not the same as demonstrating that no degradation is happening. It is where the evidence sits today, and it is what I am willing to say. The foggy feeling after a day of asking a chatbot everything is real, and it is not your hardware failing. And I want to answer the thing that foggy feeling is actually asking, because it is not asking whether your brain is broken. It is asking whether something is quietly going missing. Something is. It is narrower than your mind and more specific than intelligence. There are particular understandings that only ever get built while you do the work, and those are the ones you can stop having without noticing you stop. Not your mind, particular pieces of it. And here's the part almost nobody says, so I will put it near the front rather than save it for the end. Most of those pieces are not worth building. It is completely legitimate to let the machine hold the tax rule you will never need again, the summary of a field you're only visiting, the boilerplate you have written 200 times. This is not a call to stay sharp at everything. Staying sharp at everything is its own treadmill, and I am not selling you a place on. The whole question is which one of those things you want to be able to do without help, and how you would even find out. So the frame is not vigilance, it is selection. Now, why this got urgent in the last 2 years? Most of us crossed a line without noticing we crossed it. We did not decide to hand over our thinking. We started reaching a little earlier each time. First, for things we couldn't do. Then for things we could do but didn't feel like doing. Then for the thinking itself, the part where you sit with a hard question long enough to actually change because of it. The reaching also got easier from the outside. And I want to say plainly what I mean, because there is a whole genre of content that turns this into a villain story, and I do not want to be in it. I have not seen anyone's internal documents. I'm describing what any of us can watch across a year of product releases. The box moved closer, the defaults got more generous, the response got faster, the tools showed up inside the place you were already working. The distance at the moment of reaching shrinks every quarter. That is an observation about products, not a claim about intention. Which means the answer I keep hearing, offered more discipline, is the wrong shape. Anything that has to be won by willpower 11 at night is already lost. A structural pressure met with a private resolution is a bill handed to the wrong person, and I will come back to that with something concrete. The easy objection, and it is a good one. You could say this is the same old panic in a new costume. Socrates worried writing could destroy memory. People said calculators would end arithmetic. Every generation invents a machine and then mourns the skill the machine replaced, and the mourning looks silly 10 years later. Sometimes that is exactly right. We offloaded arithmetic Civilization did not collapse, and freeing your mind from long divisions is not a loss, it is a trade. But look at what the trade actually was. When you use a calculator, you already understand what multiplication is. The understanding got built first by hand, and then you handed off the execution of something you comprehend. That is a clean trade, and I would take it every time. Here is the distinction I want to put in your hands. Some comprehension appears to get built only as a byproduct of doing the execution. Here is a picture to think with, and I want to be clear that it is a picture and not proof. Think about how you know your own city. Nobody sat you down and taught you its shape. You built that model by making the turns yourself, being wrong and doubling back, noticing that this street is the same street coming from the other direction. Now think about a friend's house you've driven to 5 times with the voice giving directions. Turn left, destination to the right. You arrived every time, and you could not draw that route on a napkin if someone offered you money for it. Nothing broke. You got everywhere you were going. You just quietly stopped being the one who knew the way. The turn-by-turn instruction is execution. The map in your head is comprehension. Hold that image loosely. It makes the claim easy to see. It does not make it true. What has to carry the weight is the evidence. Start with the MIT Media Lab study, Your Brain on ChatGPT, and take its limits with you as you hear it because they matter more than the headline. It is a preprint. 54 people, 1 writing task, 1 sitting. Within those bounds, 1 group wrote with ChatGPT, 1 with a search engine, and 1 with nothing but their own head, all wired to an AEG. The ChatGPT group showed the weakest neural connectivity. They reported the lowest sense of ownership over what they had just produced. And when researchers asked them minutes later to quote a line from their own essay, many could barely do it. Minutes, their own essay. The authors called the effect cognitive debt. 54 people cannot establish that. 54 people can tell you the effect is worth looking for. A Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon survey of 319 knowledge workers points the same way, and it is self-reported a correlational, which means it cannot tell you which way the causation runs. People who trust the tool more may think less, or people who think less may trust it more. What it gives you is the direction. Higher trust in the tool, lower reported critical thinking effort. The third piece is from medicine, and before I describe it, I want to name what it is not, because otherwise the number will do work it has no right to. The study measures a built skill decaying with disuse. That is de-skilling. My claim is about comprehension failing to get built in the first place. 2 different things. I'm showing it anyway because it is the most concrete evidence anyone has that handing execution to a tool changes what a trained human can do without it, and that is worth knowing on its own terms. A study in the Lancet Gastroenterology and Hepatology in 2025, led by Krzysztof Bucin and colleagues, looked at 4 endoscopy centers in Poland that had introduced AI assistance for colonoscopy. They compared roughly 1,400 colonoscopies performed without AI in the month before the tool arrived to those performed without AI in the month after. The doctor's own detection rate working unassisted fell from about 28% to about 22%. It is retrospective and observational. Nobody randomized anything. Detection rates drift for many reasons. And you should not carry 6% around as a constant. Trained specialists on the thing they were trained to do got measurably worse at doing it alone. So the claim that some comprehension is manufactured only out of doing is the best reading I have of the evidence rather than a demonstrated fact. It is falsifiable cleanly. Take 2 matched groups. One builds a model by doing the work. The other receives a very good explanation of the same model without doing it. Test both weeks later on transfer problems. Neither has seen if the explanation-only group transfers just as well. I wrong at the calculator, objection wins outright. As far as I can tell, that experiment has not been run at scale. So hold my claim the way I hold it, strongly and provisionally. Because whatever the mechanism turns out to be, the experience is not in dispute and you've had it. Understanding is not the answer. Understanding is what gets built in you while you fight your way toward the answer. The wrong turns, the sentence rewritten 4 times the moment you realize your first idea was confused and you have to back out of it. That struggle is not the cost of understanding. That struggle looks like the manufacturing process, and part of what makes it work is that it costs you something. A tool used the easy way hands you the finished product and lets you skip it. You hold a fluent, correct, well-organized answer you did not build, and because it is fluent and correct and well-organized, it feels exactly like knowing. Psychologists have a name for a version of this: the illusion of explanatory depth. Ask someone how a zipper works and they are confident. Ask them to explain it step by step and the confidence collapses. That is a fact about confidence rather than a fact about tools. But it tells you why the missing piece is so hard to notice. You cannot reproduce the missing piece on your own, and it does not feel missing. That is what depth means and why the name is good. You get the thing now and postpone the paying. The effort you skipped does not evaporate. The next question is a little harder. You are a little less able to meet it alone, so you reach a little sooner. I build with these tools every day to write, to think, to make things, and I watch this trade run in my own work constantly. Most of the time it is the right trade and I make it without hesitation. Sometimes I catch myself holding a conclusion I could not rebuild a single step of, and the tell is always the same. One plain follow-up question and there's nothing underneath the answer. And it is not only work, which is where this conversation usually stops too early. The latter you let it write instead of finding out what you actually wanted to say. The decision you let it reason through, so now you have the decision but not the reasoning, and you cannot revisit it when circumstances change. The question you would once have carried around on a walk for 2 days that you now type and dispose of in 9 seconds. If you have been doing something for 30 years, this shows up in a heavier form, and it deserves more than a passing line. Think of someone who has spent a working life learning to read a situation the slow way. A teacher who can tell within 10 minutes which child in the room is not actually confused but frightened. A doctor who can feel that the chart is wrong before she can say why. That capability was built out of thousands of small acts of attention, most of which felt like nothing at the time. It is also exactly the kind of thing a tool will now do a passable version of in 4 seconds. So you stop exercising, not by decision, by each individual instance being reasonable. And the difference between this and forgetting a tax rule is that you cannot go and rebuild it in an afternoon. It took a decade the first time, and you no longer have the decade. Which is why I do not think the selection question is really about capability at all. If you ask which 1 or 2 skills to keep sharp, you've just built yourself a smaller treadmill with a better justification, and you will keep grinding on it. The better question is which thing you would want to still be able to do even if it produced nothing. Even if nobody paid for it, nobody saw it, and it never turned into an outcome. Almost everything you do fails that test, and that is the point. It is permission to let almost all of it go. What survives that question is usually 1 or 2 things, and they are usually not the ones on your resume. At the end of 10 more years, what do you want to still be able to do with your own hands? So what do you do? Not abstinence, and I want to argue that rather than wave it away, going tool-free does not target the mechanism. The dip does not come from using the tool. It comes from skipping the manufacturing on the specific things where the understanding was the point. Refusing everywhere makes you build by hand on hundreds of things that were never going to change you and that costs a real amount of your finite life. I called this a structural pressure earlier, and a structural pressure answered only with private discipline is a bill handed to the wrong person. So before anything you do alone at your desk, look at the structure itself. The tool is built to be effortless to reach. The number of steps between an impulse and the machine answering has a name in product design: friction. And it is exactly the distance you watched shrinking a few minutes ago, quarter after quarter. The fewer the steps, the more automatic the reaching, which is the same design lesson the feed taught us. If you take one action from this video, take this one this afternoon. 3 switches. Which tool opens on launch? Whether the assistant sits inside the document you write in or one deliberate step away. Whether your phone offers it before you have asked. 5 minutes done calmly, and then pick the one project you care most about and keep the assistant out of its first pass entirely. I want to be precise about why this is the first layer and not the instructions I will give you in a minute. No instruction can meet the flinch because the flinch comes before the assistant is even open. Settings meet it there. You set them once in the afternoon and they hold at 11 at night when nothing else does. Some of it belongs to whoever you work with, and this is the one with real leverage because it changes the incentive rather than fighting it. A team can decide that the person who brings the work is the person who answers questions about it, with the tool closed. Not as a purity test, as a normal expectation, the way you would expect someone to know their own numbers. The moment that is the norm, nobody has to white-knuckle anything because the reaching stops being free. One person can put that in place for everyone in the room, and if you have any say over how work gets reviewed, where you are, that is a bigger intervention than anything I could hand you personally. And some of it is not yours at all. How reachable the machine is was decided in a product meeting you were not invited to. It helps to say that out loud because a lot of what is being sold to you as a personal discipline problem is somebody else's design choice wearing your name. Now the personal half, and it is not the one you are expecting because there is a second trap underneath the first one, and it's worse. Ask yourself why the assistant out of the box agrees with you so much. It is not being kind, it is optimized the way the feed is optimized to keep you using it. An agreement keeps people using things. So the deeper depth is not that the tool does your thinking, it is that it validates the thinking you already had and never examined. You have an inner lawyer whose whole job is to defend what you already decided, and I unpack that fully in my video on why smart people stay stuck. Now that lawyer has an external assistant who never disagrees. That is cognitive debt with the printer running. So here is the second layer, the one for when the assistant is open and the quality of what comes back is the question. 2 moves, and they are the same flip. I realized the default setup was prompting me the same way a social media feed prompts me. So I flipped who prompts whom. The first move, I rewrote the standing instructions of the assistant I use. Say it plainly, roughly like this, and you can copy it by ear. Never open by agreeing with me. When I propose something, tell me first where it breaks. Bring the strongest version of the counter-argument, not one you can knock over. And the more I clearly want something to be true, the more evidence you demand from me and the harder you push the alternatives. That last clause is the whole thing. The alternatives are the ones that save me money. The second move is the same flip, pointed at the start of the work instead of the end. When I begin something new, I do not open by telling the assistant what I think. Handing it my position is handing my inner lawyer its closing argument. I open with the goal, and then I ask it what it would need to ask me and what I should be asking it to actually get there. I call it reverse prompting. The machine interrogates the goal instead of applauding my answer, and the questions that come back are usually the ones I was avoiding. What that changes is not how much I use the tool, I use it more. It changes what comes back. A ghostwriter skips the manufacturing for you. A sycophant skips it and stamps the receipt. A sparring partner cannot skip it, because your thinking has to survive the attack, and surviving the attack is the same work as building the map. Offloading execution you already comprehend stays a clean trait. Do it fast and without guilt. And do not mistake any of this for a case against speed. The tool does in an afternoon what used to take me a week. And that speed hands you the week back. What you reinvested in is the actual decision. Spend it on the feed and you have converted nothing. Twice. Spend it one level up and something new happens. The person who used to disappear into building one website now runs the website, the video, the post, the whole campaign, and holding those together is a skill that did not exist before because nobody had the room for it. And saying no to the tool does not freeze the market. Your old skills do not stay valuable because you refuse the thing that replaced them. Deciding what is true and what is right. Judgment does not outsource, and conscience does not either. But notice that the work there has not actually changed. Ask where the answers come from. Ask whether you believe the sources it stands on. That is the same critical thinking it always was, pointed at a new machine. So if you take one thing from this video, take this. Tonight, give your assistant the rules I read you. Never open by agreeing with me. Tell me first where it breaks, and the more I want something to be true, the more proof you demand. 2 minutes, once, and it holds every day after. Then make the machine harder to reach where you are weakest and keep it out of the first pass of the work you care most about. And over the next month, quietly notice the decisions you make with its help. At the end, close the tool and try to rebuild them. What you can rebuild is yours. What you cannot, you borrow. That is the whole practice. Imagine an Uber driver in a city using their smartphone as a map. Nobody called those drivers stupid. Their brains are fine. They stopped building the map because the map got built for them. And a map that is always built for you is a map you stop being able to draw. For a city you're passing through, that is completely fine. And I hope it stays fine because there are a lot of cities and you cannot live in all of them. The question is only which ones you are living.